My name is Liz, and you're watching For Booking Out Loud. Today, I just wanted to share the best books I've read for the last couple months in self-isolation. The first book I want to talk about is called Tightrope by Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wudon. Kristof and Wudon introduced this book by stating that 1/4 of the kids who rode the number 6 school bus with Kristof in Yamhill, Oregon, are dead because of drugs, suicide, alcohol, among other things. In particular, they follow Kristof's old neighbors, the Knapps, and how 3 out of 4 of their children are dead. And they're dead for many different reasons. And then they follow these stories, and they use Kristof's personal stories and the Knapps' personal stories as a case study for the rest of rural America. What really drew me to this book is that it truly is a nonfiction that's a call to action, rather than just something that tells you about problems in this area. They don't just say, like, homelessness is a problem, poverty is a problem, drug addiction's a problem. They say these are the steps you can take to help out. These are the steps you can take to help solve some of these problems. I think if you liked Hillbilly Eulogy by DJ Vance, this is the kind of book that you would like. It really tells the story of families that live in rural America. Maybe not the Appalachians like Vance did in his book, but this is in particular one that deep dives into Yamhill, Oregon, deep dives into a community. And because of Kristof's connection, he truly wants to see it better, just like DJ Vance did for his family. If a story like that resonates with you, I truly think that Tightrope will resonate with you as well. Another book I want to recommend is The Library of Legends by Janie Chang. This book is a historical fiction novel set a little bit before World War II in 1937. So the main character is called Leon, and she goes to Minghua University, I believe. But she goes to university in the city of Nanking, which is actually the capital of China during this period. And all over the country during this time, university students and cities in general were very scared that their city would be bombed. And so when the Japanese start bombing the city of Nanking, the government decides that all middle schools, high schools, and universities would retreat together to inner China. And in Leon's particular case, they retreated to Chengdu, China, which is smack dab in the middle of the country. Now, Leon's university is interesting because, based on real life events, historical nonfiction, they had tombs housed in the university called the Library of Legend. Now, these tombs were written 5,000 years ago, and they're the only written versions of these legends. So they're a very important historical artifact, not just for the university in Lyon, but for China itself. These university students were tasked with not just retreating and saving their lives, but retreating and saving these tombs. Now, the author writes that this story is based on fact. When the universities retreated, her father had to carry historical artifacts into inner China to try to save them. Leon meets Xiao and Sparrow, whose stories are actually reflective of a story in the Library of Legends. I love this book because it's a story that's not told often in the United States or in English writings. Not only do you get something that's fun to read, that you get an adventure tale, you get to see how reading itself can take you from a place that is maybe war-torn, that has death, that has intrigue. So you get so much history, but you also get a fantasy out of this book. And if that's something interesting to you, it's worth the read. The next book I want to recommend is The Ninth House by Leah Bardugo. So this book is about a girl named Galaxy Alex who has a special gift to see ghosts all the time. And this is actually a very unique gift in this world, because usually people who even know about the other world or paranormal have to go through a lot and put their bodies at risk in order to even see or catch a glimpse of ghosts. So the fact that she can see them every day without having to do anything for it is very special. So Alex, with this gift, is recruited by Yale. Because she has this amazing gift, she has to police the supernatural houses of Yale. It's such a old town that she is forced to monitor their paranormal activities. She has to be there in case something goes wrong. And something does go wrong. There is a death in New Haven, and she suspects that it has some supernatural connections. And she decides to investigate, even though everyone is telling her to leave it alone. And that is where we start the book. I have to admit, it took me about 100 pages to get into this story. You don't really know what's going on until you're deep within the plot. And I believe that's really intentional by Bardugo. There's so much you have to learn in this world. You have to learn names of the houses that Alex polices. You have to learn the names of these secret society. But the book doesn't leave you hanging. You do learn it as you go along. You just have to be patient as you read along to follow the path that Bardugo takes you. I have to admit, there are some warnings for this book. There's sexual assault, there's drugs, there's death in sometimes very horrific ways. If that's not your cup of tea, don't pick this book up. However, if you can accept that and keep reading, I really highly suggest this book. The next book I want to recommend is Brian Greenwood's The Reckless Oath We Made. This book is about Z, who lives with her younger sister and nephew. She has to deal with everyday life problems. And then she also has to deal with the book's second main character, who is named Gentry. Now, Gentry is, I think, what makes this book phenomenal. Gentry is someone who lives in a fantasy land. He believes in knights in shining armor. He believes in quests and champions and dragons. And he believes that he was sent on a quest by the voices in his head to be Z's champion. And part of the reason why he believes these things is because he is autistic. Now, we start this book off by Z's sister going missing. And then later Z finds out that her sister was abducted during a prison riot. And all these events happen where her nephew gets taken by his grandparents. Her sister's under investigation for maybe co-conspiring with the rioters, and her life just seems to be falling apart. However, Gentry comes in and he's just trying to make her life better. He is her champion. And it's just about this beautiful story between these two people that are just trying to live. I love how Greenwood wrote this story because, again, you have two perspectives. And Z's perspective, you keep going and you keep going, and it's fine. But what really makes this story is Gentry's perspective. He is written in Old English because he believes he is a knight in shining armor. And he truly believes Z is his princess. And it's a beautiful story of compassion, humanity, and kindness when everything in someone's life goes wrong. And it has just enough action and it has just enough mystery and love that it's worth at least trying to pick up, in my opinion. The next book I'm going to recommend is called Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This book is about a girl named Maggie. Now, it starts about a story when Maggie was 5 years old and her mom and dad moved into a house named Baneberry Hall. The story goes that Baneberry Hall is haunted, and after only 3 weeks, Maggie and her parents fled in the middle of the night because of these ghosts. Maggie doesn't believe this story. However, her dad wrote a book called House of Horrors about their 3-week stay in this house, and it became an instant bestseller and completely ruined Maggie's life. Maggie was forever known as the girl from that book, but she remembers absolutely nothing about that house. She remembers nothing from those 3 weeks, but she's plagued by this book that her father wrote. Skip forward 20 years. Maggie is now a house flipper, so she renovates houses to resell them. And it just so happens that Maggie's father just died, leaving Maggie Baneberry Hall. And as she starts renovating it, things start happening within the house that gives it a supernatural element. I decided to pick up this book, Home Before Dark, because it sounded really interesting for me, and I'm always down for a ghost thriller. And this book delivered. It was a really good mystery, and it definitely kept pace throughout the whole book. You have one chapter in Maggie's perspective, the very much non-believer who is mad at her parents. She wants this house gone. She just is entering the house for the first time, continuing on with her life. And then you go to the next chapter, which is reading a chapter of her father's book, House of Horrors, where you have this mystery element where you're supposed to know it's a house of horrors. And these events kind of coincide because Maggie's entering the house for the first time. Maggie at 5, through her father's perspective, is entering the house for the first time. She's seen a certain photo for the first time. Her father's seen this photo for the first time. And these parallel stories keep moving forward, and you want to see what side of the story these things keep happening in. And I think the end of the story was very satisfying, where it doesn't leave you hanging and it doesn't leave you angry either. And so I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a ghost mystery horror story. The next book I would recommend is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Universe. I know I'm incredibly late to this story, but I am so glad I picked it up. It has won so many awards, and I've known it's won so many awards for years, and I've been meaning to read it, and I've finally gotten the time to experience this book. It is about Aristotle and Dante, who meet at a pool one summer, and you get to experience their friendship and growing up for about 2 years of their life. And honestly, that's it. That's all this book is about. You get to watch them grow from a child to be a young adult, and then you have them discover their romances, their sexuality. It's a really good, feel-good story, and the way this author writes is just almost poetic, because he makes something that seems so normal beautiful. And I can now understand why it got so many awards. Aristotle and Dante discover the universe. The title is the summary, and yet the title also demonstrates how well the author can articulate the story. Pick it up and do yourself a favor if you haven't read it. I want to recommend The Vanishing Half by Brett Bennett. This is one of the most complex but beautiful books I have ever read. It might be one of my top books this year. At its base, it is about the stories of twin sisters. You have Stella and you have Desiree. Now, these two sisters, when they're about 16, decide to run away to New Orleans because they saw no future in their town. One of the sisters decides that because of the lightness of her skin tone, to pass as white. The other sister decides to stay within the black community and continue to pass as black. Now you move forward a couple of years. They both have daughters. Stella, the girl who's passing as white, has never told her white husband that she's black, her white daughter that she is black. And then you have the opposite happen to Desiree. In a town that values the lightness of skin tone, she moves back with a daughter that has incredibly dark skin because of the man that she married. And then Brett Bennett decides to start telling the stories of their daughters as well, and what it means to grow up in the 60s as a white girl, as a brown girl, and just the complex stories of all of these characters coming together or not coming together, and the intricate ways that Bennett weaves these stories together and shows all the complexities of the storyline is absolutely gorgeous. It's just a great book. Pick it up. This is Future Liz. Hi. I realized that I never made an ending for my video, so this is my ending. Those were the books that I really enjoyed during quarantine, and I really hope that you learned something or you found a book that you want to now read. If you have some books that you've absolutely enjoyed during quarantine, I really want to hear them. So please comment with a recommendation. I love growing my TBR list, and eventually I'll get to it, I promise. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you're staying safe. Bye.